We are all confronted these days with the same overarching question: how to make a contribution to a more sustainable planet. Whether you are a consumer just enjoying the occasional glass of wine, a business, or a government agency, we all need to ask ourselves, how can we contribute toward lowering the carbon footprint? That's why we asked ourselves, when buying a bottle of wine, how can we make a difference? We wanted to show that there is value in providing some guidance, so as to help consumers to choose more sustainable wine, and provide feedback to interested businesses and government agencies regulating the wine markets. We think that providing such insight is relevant, since there is still a lack of sustainability information, transparency and knowledge in the wine market, not least for consumers to make more informed wine purchase decisions. Our research question is, what are the key sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the Finnish wine supply chain? In particular, carbon emissions as reflected in a product's carbon footprint. In general, by carbon footprint, we mean the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere as a result of the activities of a particular individual, organization or community. Now, Finland is a good case study because it's nearly fully reliant on wine imports, and therefore depends heavily on sourcing through global supply chains that may have questionable sustainability implications. We wanted to pursue this research question in order to improve the current state of information on wine sustainability relevant to consumers, businesses and regulators in Finland. When you pick up a bottle of wine from the shelf in your local store, you can distinguish between intrinsic and extrinsic attributes. Intrinsic attributes refer to things you experience only after opening the bottle, like the sweetness of the wine. Extrinsically, a bottle may be labeled for organic or for the country of origin, and the bottle may be of glass or some other material. While a certified organic label is likely to provide you with information about the use of pesticides and the country of origin, information on the bottle packaging is unlikely part of an organic label. Yet if you had such packaging information, this might give you some indication about the environmental sustainability associated with that wine. But at present, there are very few labels and information providers that deliver such comparable data, which tell consumers what carbon footprint is associated with a given bottle of wine and certain product and process attributes. So to address the lack of knowledge on the carbon footprint associated with wines imported into Finland, our study tried to look at the wine supply chain, meaning roughly the farmer producing the grapes, the grape processor producing the wines, the retailer selling the wines in Finland, and the transport businesses in between. In the first place, we had to define system boundaries for the analysis to capture what we mean by the global supply chain of the wine industry for wine consumed in Finland. We collected data from sources such as EcoInvent, a worldwide life cycle assessment database, and from the UK Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, but also from previous studies on the Finnish wine market. In some cases, we used estimates that are commonly applied in expert reports. We used the so-called life cycle assessment methodology to investigate implications for greenhouse gas emissions related to potential policy changes. Life cycle assessment aims mostly to track environmental impacts and assess them from a systems perspective, identifying strategies for businesses and government for sustainability improvement without burden shifting, which means without imposing costs on others. Life cycle assessment is like a screening tool that can pinpoint environmental hotspots, that is, those points in the wine supply chain that can be most effectively changed in order to improve the overall carbon footprint. Our study shows that we, as consumers, can make a big difference already with little effort, for example by purchasing wines in lighter weight glass bottles. The study found that the use of lightweight bottles could by itself reduce carbon emissions on average by 6%. Generally, we found that the carbon footprint of consuming a bottle of wine can range from 0.59 kilograms CO2 equivalents for French wine in a bag-in-box to 1.92 kilograms CO2 equivalents for Australian wine in a glass bottle. From a greenhouse gas emissions point of view, purchasing wines from countries that are closer to Finland, say Spain, can in some cases be a good choice, but not always. For example, we find that wines produced and imported from France have a relatively low carbon footprint, yet this is largely because they are produced to a large extent with nuclear energy. So, considering the potential negative side effects of nuclear energy use, it is up to us as consumers to judge whether a lower carbon footprint is the only meaningful metric when making a sustainable product choice. Well, one of the bigger takeaways is the consideration that we could say goodbye to glass bottles altogether and switch to other packaging formats, such as bag-in-box, since our study clearly suggests that there are environmental sustainability gains to be made in this way. Yet the answer is not so simple. Since the wine supply chain has become increasingly globalized, glass can also be a reliable and safe means for transportation when you think of plastics potentially leaking into the wine. That's why greenhouse gas emissions issues are not the only issues to be considered. So in sum, our study finds that the biggest impact with respect to reducing the carbon footprint in the Finnish wine supply chain can be achieved by reducing glass bottle weight, moving away from glass packaging toward bag-in-box, and increasing bulk wine export to Finland in big containers. So next time you buy a bottle of wine, take a moment to reflect on how you could make an impact by choosing a more sustainable wine.